Today, we're going to talk about a man you've probably never heard of, Daniel Williams. And that's okay. He wasn't a famous general or founding father, but his story, well, it tells us something incredibly important about how a real legacy is built. He was this essential link, a quiet but absolutely critical connection between one world and the next. So that gets you thinking, right? How is a legacy actually built? Is it just one big heroic moment, piling up a huge fortune? Or is it something else? Something a little quieter? Well, if Daniel Williams' life is anything to go by, it's not something that happens in a single generation. Instead, a real lasting legacy seems to get carried across a vital bridge, a bridge that connects the past to the future. And Daniel, he was the man who built that bridge. Okay, let's get into it. To really understand this bridge, first we have to understand the world he was born into. And believe me, this was the rugged, still being figured out frontier of colonial America. So, Daniel was born way back in March of 1679 in a place called Shrewsbury, New Jersey. Now, his parents, John Williams and Elizabeth Allen, weren't just living there, they were some of the original settlers. They showed up when the whole area was basically a raw, dense wilderness. Daniel was one of the very first kids of European descent to actually be born there. What's so powerful about this timeline is the story it tells at a glance. I mean, think about it. Daniel's life starts just a few years after his dad literally carved a home out of the wilderness. And he dies only 6 years before the Declaration of Independence. His life is the bridge, connecting that brand new settlement to the birth of a nation. To really get what Daniel was all about, we need to know this term, yeoman. He wasn't exactly like his father, who became a big landowner, and he wasn't a specialized craftsman like his son would be. A yeoman was a landowner who worked his own farm. You can think of them as the sturdy, independent backbone of colonial society, the very foundation everything else was built on. So, this brings us to the real core of Daniel's life. See, his job wasn't to go out and break new ground. It was to take the foundation his father had already laid and make it absolutely unshakable. And here's the key. Daniel was a consolidator. He inherited a big chunk of the family's original 90-acre homestead, but he didn't just sit on it. Nope, he made a smart strategic move and bought up a valuable piece of land right next door from a guy named John Brindley. This wasn't about massive expansion. It was about locking down the family's core wealth and making sure their presence in Shrewsbury was solid as a rock. And this whole idea of bridging the old and the new wasn't just in his land deals. You can see it in his personal life, too. His long life basically spanned 2 different eras, and you can see that reflected in his 2 marriages. His first wife, well, she represents the family's early roots. But much, much later in life, in 1759, he marries his second wife, Mary. And this signals a really fascinating cultural shift. You see, Daniel's parents were devout Quakers. Their whole lives were pretty much governed by the rules of the Quaker meeting. But his marriage to Mary, that was secured by a civil bond from the royal governor. This means it was almost certainly performed by a magistrate, not inside the Quaker faith. It's a subtle change, but it's a huge pivot away from the strict traditions of the past. And that brings us to the final act of his life, and honestly, the most crucial part of his legacy. In his will, Daniel laid out the ultimate blueprint for his family's future. He was making sure that the bridge he'd spent his life building would stand long after he was gone. Just take a second to think about this number, 91. Living to be 91 in the 18th century was, well, it was extraordinary. It gave him this unique bird's-eye perspective, letting him see multiple generations grow up and allowing him to plan with some incredible foresight. And this right here is the proof. This document is a summary of Daniel's will, which he drafted in 1769. This is the key to understanding his final vision. He wasn't just handing out his stuff, he was engineering the next phase of his family's story. The will itself was very practical. It was officially proven in May 1770, right after he died. He named his wife Mary and his oldest son, John, as the executors. And he kept the main family land together by giving it all to John. But the most forward-thinking part, the most brilliant part, was a special rule he made for his youngest son, George, who was from his second marriage. And this quote just brilliantly shows his foresight. The will specifically said that George had to be put to a trade. Now, think about that. Daniel, the yeoman farmer, saw that the future might not just be in farming. His older son, John, was already a successful cordwainer, that's a shoemaker. Daniel knew that having a skilled trade meant real security.
This one instruction was a total game changer. It basically set a new course for the whole family. The Williams family was officially transitioning. Daniel was using his will to pivot the family's entire economic identity, shifting them from farmers who owned land to skilled tradesmen who had a craft. So, let's bring this all home. What was the ultimate impact of this 91-year life? It was the successful construction of that generational bridge we've been talking about.
I mean, this slide lays it out perfectly, doesn't it? You have Generation 1, his dad, John, the pioneer who got the land. Then you have Generation 2, Daniel, the yeoman who locked it down and made it secure. And because of what Daniel did, Generation 3, his son John and others, could become specialized tradesmen in a now established society.
He was, just as the historical record puts it, the vital anchor. His life's work secured everything the past generation had gained and unlocked all the new opportunities of the future. He bridged that huge gap between a shaky little homestead in the wild and a stable family ready for success right on the eve of the American Revolution. And that leaves us with one last question to chew on. Daniel Williams wasn't famous, but his legacy was profound because he deliberately and thoughtfully built a bridge for the people who came after him. It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What bridges are we, in our own lives, building for the future?